Hi, folks. Along with all the confusion over all the different acronyms, I regularly get asked, wait, how does OER work in relation to UDL or culturally responsive pedagogy or UI or WCAG? Like, often I'm in one meeting and I hear OER come up and I don't really understand what's the difference? Why are we talking about this? Why is this even connected to pedagogy? So this was created out of a desire to really help everybody understand connecting UDL, CRP, UX/UI, ADA, WCAG with OER, and then we'll also talk about the three main learning theories that are often associated with OER as well. So why does this matter? I get asked all the time, like, hey, I don't get it. I was in this other meeting about dual enrollment and then suddenly OER came up. I was in this other meeting and we're talking about equity and this came up. I was in another meeting and we were talking about instructional interventions and OER came up. I was in another meeting, we're talking about an access hypothesis and OER come up. It comes up in a lot of different ways. OER comes up in a lot of different ways because it is the solution or one of the different targeted approaches to a lot of different challenges. And it's because students experience the whole learning environment at once. They don't just experience cost or access or navigation or representation or flexibility or usability. They experience all of this at once. So often OER will come up in multiple different ways because it is part of the solution to a lot of these different elements or integration of a lot of these elements. So they are complementary, they are not interchangeable. It is that Venn diagram that I showed you at the very beginning. They can be used separately, but they actually work best when they are complementing one another. Okay, so UDL, Universal Design for Learning, Culturally Responsive Pedagogy, or CRP, ADA, which is a Title II federal law, and then UX and UI, which is user interfaces, right? They are not the same thing, but they are very complementary parts of student-centered course design. This has a lot to do with addressing different dimensions of student experience, their learning design. Do they feel like they belong? Are they represented in the content? Is there disability access? Is the content usable and accessible? OER supports all of these by improving day one access. It's adaptable and it's affordable. Together, these approaches create this kind of content. So it increases and intersects with California community colleges in Title V, Title II, inclusive course design, and burden-free access to instructional materials. So this is the Venn diagram that I often show people when I talk about inclusive and effective learning practices. From this, you have equitable and engaging content, clear, intuitive interfaces, and this often has a lot of overlap with UDL, CRP, WCAG, and UI. And this creates user-friendly, culturally relevant content, as well as being flexible and adaptable to these contents. So it's just very, very overlapping when we talk about it. So at a glance, UDL supports flexibility in learning design, multiple modalities of engagement. Someone needs to turn it in paper, someone needs to turn it in digitally, someone else wants to take a screenshot and write on their screen. Culture responsive pedagogy. This centers belonging, cultural relevance, right? If the book was written in England, it would say the boot of the car, whereas if it's written here, it's going to say the trunk of the car, right? If you're in a place that has mainly markets, you say go to the market. If you're in a place that says mainly grocery stores, it says grocery stores. If you are dealing mainly with a specific population, you might want to say one term rather than a different term for different cultural contexts to make sure people understand and feel like they belong. WC and ADA, this is related to accessibility for disabilities, and it is also a Title II requirement. UX and UI is about the friction the students experience when navigating and interacting with this content, and it's related to clarity, efficiency, and satisfaction. So UDL, this is now a Title V core requirement. The primary goal is to reduce learning barriers by designing flexible instruction from the start. Ask the question, how can learners access, engage with, and express learning in multiple ways? Key principles can be multiple means engagement. It can be representation. It can be action and expression. It can be evaluation. Maybe some people do best with a multi-question test or quiz. Others might need to have more of a conversation about it. What does success look like in this course? And are they able to demonstrate that success in different ways that could be a little bit easier for them? Outputs. It can be a UDL aligned syllabus. It can be an assignment choice board or a choose your own adventure board where they get to choose how they want to show their learning. It can be an accessible lesson module. It can be module assessment formats, or it could be scaffolded templates. There's a lot of different things, and that's just scratching the surface. Culturally responsive pedagogy, the primary goal is to improve learning and belonging by connecting students to their cultural identities, to lived experience without tokenizing. That's going to be really important. The core question is whose knowledge counts here? Did students actually get a choice in the case studies that are being used? Are you using content that actually makes sense to them? Whose power shows up in this classroom norms? This is a lot about asset-based framing, cultural relevance, relationships, and relationship-centered teaching, high expectations and support, and then critical consciousness. This is related to culturally responsive pedagogy, lesson plans. It could be revised reading. It can be lists of representation rationale, equity-centered rubrics, or culturally relevant case studies. Now, WCAG and ADA Title II accessibility, this is whether it's perceivable, operatable, understandable, and robust. This is making sure that every single person, regardless of their disability, has access to the content. If they do not, we are not entitled to compliance. UX and UI, this is about user experience and design interface. This is about how much friction is there for a student when they're engaging with your content. The primary goal is efficient, clear, and satisfying with no errors. Think about when you click through a website and it's circular, you don't hit any dead ends, it's not confusing, you can find what you want intuitively. That's good user experience and interface design. So can users find what they need, understand it quickly, and complete the tasks easily? This also works in your Canvas courses, right? Think about instructional design. Do the students understand how to navigate your course without having to reach out and ask you? Key methods are user interviews and journey maps, wireframes and prototypes, usability tests and analytics. And it can be as simple as making sure that the navigation is very, very clear and that there's a guide on how to use the content. Okay. Here's another way of visualizing it when you're talking about it in more of an umbrella model, which is a little bit more of a hierarchical model. The ultimate goal is inclusive and effective learning experiences for all of our students. From that, you have UDL, CRP, WCAG, ADA compliance, and UX. This leads to flexible and accessible materials, flexible and ultimately intuitive interfaces, and it's culturally relevant for the students, which means that they're tapping into their why and they understand why this content matters. So you're like, okay, Rachel, why or how is an OER librarian talking about this? How does this matter? OER is not the same type of frameworks as UDL, CRP accessibility. It relates to access and instructional materials as a whole. So it technically supports all four of these concepts. So under Title V, colleges are encouraged to strengthen burden-free access to instructional materials. It reduces cost barriers, it's adaptable and remixable, and it's day one access. The qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research on OER is clear that OER is both an equity and an instructional intervention, that it can actually raise grades by 3/4 of a grade point average, even when controlling for teacher and cost. And it basically is about how students can connect and interact with the content because they have access to it day one. So how do these frameworks work together? Think of it in forms of a pyramid. OER is actually that foundational principle. Can students afford and actually access the materials? They can't engage with it if they don't have it. They can't connect with it and learn from it if they don't have access to it, and if they're worried about whether or not they can even just purchase it. So can students afford and access the materials? Once they have it, then you have to ask, can they technically access the course? Can the students with disabilities, can the students who need digital content and the students who need physical content, do they have technical access to the course? Then you have UX and UI. Can students navigate it easily? Then you have, can students engage and demonstrate learning? That's UDL. That's when they are actually being able to demonstrate that they've learned something. Then you have culturally responsive pedagogy. Do students feel seen, respected, and meaningfully included? Now, which one belongs in which order? Does the hierarchy, belong in the reverse? This is something that we could argue about on a philosophical level, but all of these things build upon one another. So really, this is about the fact that if you don't have students who can access the materials, can they navigate it? If you don't have students who can afford the materials, are they going to feel seen and heard? If the students don't have access and can't afford the materials, how are they supposed to see themselves represented within it if they don't even have access to it? How are they supposed to navigate it if they don't have access to it? How are they supposed to have technical access to it if they don't have actual commercial access, if they don't have the ability to actually even have it and engage with it? Which is why OER becomes the foundational principle for all of the above. If there's a cost barrier to your content, you're never even able to get all of your students to the UX, UDL, or CRP. If you have a cost barrier for your students, some of them are never going to get to feeling seen, respected, and meaningfully included to be able to engage with the content flexibly because they don't even have access to the content, which is why OER is often seen as the foundation of these things in practical implementation. So think about OER as removing cost barriers and allowing immediate, customized access to course materials. It incorporates all of the above, and you're asking, can students actually access this materials on day one without cost, without permissions, without any barriers? Because the reality is students are already at cognitive fatigue and cognitive overload. So having day one access is the best way to make sure that our students are set up for success. Key principles, open license, retain, reuse, revise, remix, redistribute. I got a whole other video on that. Creative Commons licensing, we have a whole other video on that. Common tools for this, it can be LibreText, it can be OER Commons, Adapt. The outputs, they can be textbooks, they can be homework systems, they can be any number of different modalities and materials. So when you're like, okay, Rachel, bring it home for us. So we talked originally about how UDL, CRP, WCAG, ADA, and UX are all a Venn diagram. OER is one implementation measure that includes all of these things. It's basically an easy way to include all four of these things. Same thing with the umbrella model. OER makes it very easy to include all of these things in one way. So UDL is another great way to look at this. If you'd rather say, well, Rachel, I don't like that, you're an OER librarian. Of course you see OER everywhere. I want to look at it through Universal Design for Learning. I want to look at it through UDL lens as the umbrella. Great. So UDL is made up of engagement, representation, and action and expression. The action and expression piece is OER. Representation can be done through OER. Engagement can be done with OER because you get it in multiple modalities. So even when we're talking about it through a UDL lens of relevant, adaptable, inclusive, and accessible, OER becomes one of the most actionable ways to get to UDL. So this is under copyright. So the CAST UDL guidelines, this is, again, engagement, representation, and action. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because this is about learner agency. But this takes us to, okay, design frameworks for teaching. So frameworks help us design learning environments and instructional materials. Teaching approaches can help us think about how we're structuring learner choice and learner agency. So when we ask in design, what barriers are we removing? Teachers also are asking, how are students guided, supported, and empowered to learn? And so this is where we get into pedagogy, andragogy, and pedagogy. I know a lot of people have never even heard of the last one. A lot of people haven't even heard of andragogy. And I will say them badly all the time. Sometimes I'll say andragogy, sometimes I'll say andragogy. Same thing with pedagogy. So these are design frameworks. They are grounded in a much broader idea of how people learn. And you might say, Rachel, why are you, an OER librarian, talking about this? In information science, we talk a lot about how different people learn. So learning approaches are built into a lot of the information sciences. Okay. K through 12 is pedagogy. This is teacher directed, teacher structured. This is the instructor decides the what, the how, the where. Everything is really very teacher centered, teacher focused, teacher lecturing, teacher organizing. That's pedagogy. Andragogy is adult focused, problem centered learning. You give your students a problem and say, figure out how to fix it based on the concepts and the principles that we've been working on. You allow them to choose their own case studies to apply the theory and the foundational knowledge to. You're allowing them to leverage prior experience, autonomy, and real life relevance to start taking ownership over their own learning. Pedagogy is true self-determined learning. This is where learners define the goals, the paths, the outputs. This would be things like develop your own research project, develop your own research question. They're still applying the framework, they're still being guided by subject experts, but this builds capability for new contexts, for students to be able to go out and build their own research projects, to run their own studies outside of you. Pedagogy is where we're ultimately going with learners. We want students to be adult focused. Andragogy is where we are in a lot of colleges. We're moving towards pedagogy, which is basically allowing them to apply what they learn in different formats and in different contexts. So just to explain this in a little bit more detail, because a lot of people get stuck in pedagogy. A lot of people get stuck in this narrative of, oh, it's just pedagogy and pedagogy is the end all be all. And honestly, pedagogy is the floor. It's the threshold. It's where we're starting. It assumes the learners need extreme structure and instructor direction. It assumes that the students can't do anything without the instructor. And the instructor decides what will be learned, how it will be learned, and how learning will be assessed. This is often for children, K through 12, and it describes any teacher-led structure created by teachers. I have seen teachers who get stuck in this because of their ego or because they're worried about their students. And so they want to handhold the students too much. And I think sometimes when it comes to, from just personally looking as a librarian, kids coming from the K through 12 who've only experienced pedagogy, they need a bridge between pedagogy and andragogy. So this is where basically we need to start letting go of their hands and going to more of an andragogical approach, which is that self-directed, allowing them to bring in their experience, to ask them for relevant, problem-based, and immediately useful. This is asking, why does this matter? And giving them choice and structure and allowing them to really respect their experiences as young adults or as adult learners. Pedagogy is where learners get to take even more major responsibility. And ultimately, this is where all students are headed. Whether or not we call it pedagogy, this is where they're headed. This is where they are defining how they want to learn, their goals, their pathways, their resources, their demonstrations. It's also related to competency-based learning, and it focuses on capability, adapting new skills to new complex situations, where basically they have all of the content, but they're applying it in different contexts. And this is where learners design the project. They still have curated information. They still have mentors. They still have teachers around. But it's about the learner having full autonomy to go and learn. So when we talk about self-directed learning and competency versus capability, self-directed learning is really about learners taking initiative in managing their learning, their pacing, their practice, their studies. But usually within an instructor-defined course, right, you still have those outcomes, the assessments and the due dates. This is commonly associated with andragogy. Most community college faculty do a combo of pedagogy and andragogy. Competency versus capability. Competency is performing a defined skill to defined standard in a familiar context. Capability is adapting that skill in an unfamiliar context. You give them something completely new, and this is key in pedagogical influences. The ultimate goal is to prepare learners for the real world, and especially in the technology world that we live in with fast changing environments, AI, the need to push back against data centers, the need to push back against policy that may be harming our communities. We are in fast changing environments, and our students need to be able to adapt and be self-directed lifelong learners. This means that competency-based learning asks, can students demonstrate this skill? Capability says, can students adapt the skill to a new situation? Can they take what they learned in your class and apply it to a new situation in their community? Pedagogy asks, can students continue learning when the teacher, textbook, and platform are even no longer there? When basically OER may still exist, but the teacher's gone. Open, flexible resources can be there with students. They can evaluate, they can adapt, and they can apply knowledge beyond the course. It has that continued value. So when students say, I remember the teacher mentioning this, and we did this program and this project, but now I can go back, I can refer back to the OER resources, and I'm going to apply it to this new situation. So OER is a very powerful instructional tool. These learning approaches can help explain why OER is so effective. And it's because openly licensed materials allow instructors to adapt the content to be more of an andragogical approach, right, in their structures and their learning activities to support different levels of guidance, autonomy, and learner agency. And then this really does look at how do we support pedagogy, because you can absolutely use it the same way you would any textbook in instructor-led courses, but it also works in supporting andragogy, right, where faculty build relevance, but they also get to build choice with real world application in the materials. And then ultimately, it supports pedagogy, which is that remixable OER empowers students to pursue self determined pathways and learning, which is the true authentic outputs of self directed learners. So, when we look at the deeper context and why these frameworks matter in higher education, they're strongest when they are seen as complementary forces rather than silos. It's really easy to take a class just on CRP. It's really easy to be like, well, ADA is, it's mandated compliance. So we're going to start with compliance. But it's not just compliance, right? This is about so much more than compliance. UDL, a lot of people are now seeing UDL as just a compliance with Title V, but it is so much more than that. This is about anticipating learners' variability and reducing barriers through flexible engagement. CRP is something that's really about cultural knowledge and identities. UX is about usability, and OER is very much connected to something called knowledge justice. Knowledge justice is made up of so many different beautiful elements that I'm not going to get into right now about epistemic injustice. But basically, this is about challenging concentrated control over knowledge by enabling faculty to revise, diversify, and share materials openly, supporting democratic and participatory knowledge creation. So knowledge justice is one of my favorite things to talk about. I will probably do a whole video on knowledge justice at some point. So why should faculty do this? You are really looking at proactive design, reaching a wider range of learners, and looking at what it means to have institutional equity and break down epistemic injustice and hermeneutical injustice within our systems. And happy to talk to y'all more about epistemic injustice and hermeneutical injustice. So this is the conclusion. Better design means more equitable education. It's not about any one thing. It's about a combo of all of these things. And I believe as the OER librarian that OER can really support all of these things together. And our job is to support our students in this work. So here's all my references, and that's the end of this video.